I think the removal of the flag from State House grounds in South Carolina would be symbolically very powerful. It's a way of saying we are coming to terms with a certain commemoration of the past that spoke for only half, maybe not even half, the people of South Carolina. And as we confront that commemoration, this has no place going forward. Does that mean South Carolina has all of a sudden turned a corner and become a radically different state? By no means. But I think it's an important, I'd say, small step in charting a better future, a future that includes all South Carolinians rather than only some. It's probably worth noting that the governor of South Carolina that called for its removal is herself, a more recent immigrant, or daughter of more recent immigrants to the what's called the Sun Belt South. Her family was not even here in the 1950s and 60s. So yeah, I think it's the voice of a changing South. The notion that to remove these monuments to the Confederacy would actually involve erasing the past. As a historian who makes his bread and butter doing history, I have zero interest in erasing the past, and of course a vested interest in maintaining our narratives of the past. No one's talking about literally erasing the Confederacy. There'll still be classes in the Civil War. It'll appear in every U.S. History Survey class. But it's very different when that gets conflated with commemorations of parts of the past that favor a certain group in a society in a very explicit way. The thing that I hear that to me is the most, I would say misguided statement is this idea of heritage, not hate. History is always messy, and our hands are very much tied up in history. So the idea that history is this kind of innocuous, neutral force that's locked away in time, that has nothing to do with social relations in the present, is just untrue. At the most basic level, the flag stands for the Confederacy. So what did the Confederacy as a historical event actually stand for? The politicians that organized it as they pulled it out of the USA as a way to sustain slavery, of which they were large beneficiaries. And they felt that slavery was threatened in the USA by the rise of the very, very rapid rise of the Republican Party to national power. Now, that's back in the 1860s. There are other associations that Confederate symbols take on in the 150 years from its actual existence up to the present. By and large, I would say those are associations of white supremacy. In terms of explaining the debate that's been going on, you really kind of have, I would say, two moments with sort of a prelude. The prelude would be the actual Confederacy itself as a phenomenon in the 1860s. Shortly after that, in the 1870s, there's already the beginning of a commemoration of that relatively recent history. There's a huge wave of commemoration that goes from the late 19th century well into the early 20th century. So the original monument, before the flag was put on the State House, the original monument on the South Carolina Capitol grounds was erected in the 1870s. The Confederate monument in the center of Broad Street in downtown Augusta was erected in the 1870s. This was basically white Southerners, primarily elite white Southerners, trying to say the Confederacy may have lost the Civil War, slavery may have been abolished, but nonetheless, we're going to maintain control down here. It's a way of celebrating white supremacy. So it's no coincidence that this Confederate commemoration happens in the exact same decades as the rise of Jim Crow across the South. These are the same politicians that passed Jim Crow laws. There's another wave in the 1950s and 60s. That's when Georgia changed what had been its flag to something that looked much more like, or actively borrowed and was clearly a Confederate symbol. That's when South Carolina actually put the Confederate battle flag on top to fly over the State House. In 2000, it was removed to the monument, still on State House grounds, but actually in 1962, it was put on top of the State House. These were acts of defiance against the federal government and the civil rights movement that used the symbols of the Confederacy with a sense of, we don't care what you're doing, white Southerners are going to maintain a certain order. I think there are two reasons the Confederate flag has been in the news recently. One is that history is powerful, it's a powerful force. Sometimes in crisis moments, the presence of history comes up for people even that are not paying attention to it. So I'd say that's the first reason. The second has to do with the commemoration of the past, which tends to play into the politics of society, the power dynamics of society, a sense of who should have power, who shouldn't, who should be remembered, who's not worthy of being remembered. So there are live political issues in the commemoration of the past.